In this video, I'm going to cover how you can use the Twitter REST API access tools for Unity that I've written to retrieve profile and tweet data from Twitter's REST API. The first thing you'll need to do is go to apps.twitter.com and register your own application for pulling data down from Twitter's API. So if you don't already have a Twitter account, you'll need to go create one to use this application manager. So you go and create a new app and call it whatever you want, give it a description, however long, and then some sort of website. And callback URL is something that you need to worry about if you're using the public API, but for REST API we don't need to worry about that right now. Go ahead and click agree to these developer conditions, which I'm sure everyone's reading, and go ahead and create your application. Okay, it appears someone's already taken that name, so let's just do something else. There we go. So what we mainly need from here is your consumer key and consumer secret, which you'll need to create your access token. So head into keys and access tokens, and right here we have consumer key and consumer secret. So here we are in Unity. This is a fresh scene, and we'll have a camera and a game object. So let's start doing stuff. Let's make a little demo script. So the first thing we need to do is we need to get our access token, and that's going to allow us to access our API and do a whole host of interesting things. So we're going to need our key and secret, which we've just gone over, and we're going to make our access token from that. So in our start function, let's say access token is twitter.api.get me an access token. We're going to plug in our key and our secret. So key is that, our secret is that, which when we run it, just realised my face is over the bit while I was just filling out. If we run a key and our secret, we get this big fancy ugly string, which doesn't really mean anything right now, but it's useful. So what can we use this for? We go into here and we're going to say, let's get someone's profile information. So what we're going to need to do in order to store this information is we need to store it in a class. So Twitter.TwitterUser. You're going to be new user, and we're going to retrieve profile data from, let's say, BBC. So this will be the username of someone on Twitter, not their screen name, so there's a very big difference between that. BBC, it's the same thing, but it's an important distinction to be made there. So we're going to plug in our access token, and bool is ID. So I've written a number of methods here, and some of them involve getting profile IDs. You can get profile ID from a tweet, for example. There will be in reply to user ID. So you can get that user ID, and then you can plug that ID into this function in order to grab profile information, but for now we just want the BBC one, and I don't know their ID off the top of my head, surprisingly, so we're just going to put false for that. But we also need to view this, so let's make this a public thing, or rather serialized field. We're going to be able to view this in the editor. So we say new user, and we'll get back into Unity. We're going to run that. There's our access token, and hey, here's the user. So let's go back into MonoDevelop and let's try something different. Let's say that we would like to search Twitter for some tweets. So let's do Twitter.tweetArray. I'm just going to just call it tweets for now. I'm going to say tweets is Twitter API dot get tweets. No, let's not get, let's search for tweets. And search for tweets that have the word Unity in them. Let's go for hashtag Unity. And again, we're going to need our access token, which we grabbed earlier. There we go. And the number of tweets we want to receive, let's say 5. Now, this goes up to a limit of 200, which the API sets, and there's all sorts of things on their REST documentation which mention how many tweets you can receive in a certain amount of time. states how many profiles and tweets you can receive in a certain amount of time without sort of going over your quota. If you do go over your quota, you'll be sort of locked out from future API calls, at least for another sort of 30 minutes or something like that. So generally, don't try and grab more stuff than you need to, because you're just going to slow down the process of everything, and you might get kicked out the club. And your search type back into here for searching for tweets. So in this case, there's an enum that I have, which relates to the search query. Then here, result type. So we have mixed, recent, and popular, which is pretty self-explanatory. Recent, or it's recent tweets. Popular, the most popular ones, and a mix, which is a mix of both. So let's go for the most popular. Let's have some nice big ones. So that's that. So now, if we open up tweets, we can see there's 5 things in here. So our search results have been successful. Tweet number 1 is someone's tweet. You can see that the user is the person who did it. Their biography. So, what do you do with all this data? Well, you could do a number of things, and that's kind of why I made these tools. There's a lot of data available on Twitter, which largely goes unrecognized, but I think there's a real potential for it to be used in games, and potentially in Unity as well. I thought of a few things. So, for example, if you had the town of an RPG filled with all the various NPCs, various inhabitants, just the kind of people who just wander around and just kind of give the idea of, a populace going about its business. There's no excuse why, their metrics and their sort of characteristics can't be based off the Twitter, the data that we gather from the API here. So, the number of favorites someone could have, for example, could be like the size of their crown, or like, their status in society. It could be how much money they have. I mean, if your user is actually verified, you could give them like a literal crown. You could do things as well with the user's avatar and their profile banners. So I've actually written a helper function in here which can help turn a profile URL, grabs texture from the URL and then turns that into a sprite, which you can see in somewhere in Twitter in the helper functions in here. So we have texture2d get texture from URL. You give it a URL, it goes and retrieves the data from the web, it returns a texture. You can then use that texture, I believe I've used it in this. So you can then use this texture as a basis of your material. You can go create sprites of it. So something I've done in the past is get everyone's avatars and just sort of put them on a big cube in front of sort of blocky character, and that'll be their face. It can be used for a number of other things as well. You could just use just to try and get like a random color. Then you could use that in their clothes maybe. There's a number of different ways you could utilize this data. So I hope this video has been useful in some way. Apologies if this came off a little bit amateurish, a little bit slapdash. I don't usually make videos, and when I do, they're not very good. So if you're still watching this, thanks for sticking with me. Yeah, hopefully this was helpful.